city that is self-sustaining. It's going to be incredibly difficult to make a self-sustaining city because if it's missing any ingredient at all, however minor that ingredient is, then if the ships from Earth stop...
¿Cómo estamos, mis amigos y amigas? Aquí estamos, aquí en vivo. Tenemos a Elon Musk hablando sobre su Starship. Y esto le puede ayudar a Virgin Galactic. Entonces vamos a estar aquí en vivo viendo lo que está hablando. Para todos los que me quieran acompañar, realmente es, podemos decir, es el segundo nivel, es ya entrar a nivel de ya vivir en el espacio, y esto es la visión de Elon Musk y puede ayudar en la compañía Virgin Galactic. Todo el día de hoy estamos aquí pasando la transmisión en vivo, aquí escuchemos, realmente solo vamos a venir y escucharlo, lo que él dice, y al final de todo vamos a platicar un poquito de lo que es esta nueva, podemos decir, nueva industria, ¿verdad? Que ya viene en camino.
And I think we should try to do that as soon as we can. The window of opportunity may be open for a long time, and I hope it is, but it may also be open for a short time. And this is the first point in the 4.5 billion year history of Earth that it has been possible. I mean, let that sink in. Or if there's a sink, let it in. Still knocking at the door. I mean, it's a sentient sink. Let's face it. Come in. So, 4.5 billion years. It's been a while. This is the first time it's been possible. We need to seize the opportunity and do it as quickly as possible. I mean, to be frank, civilization is feeling a little fragile these days. And like I said, I'm an optimist, but I think we've got to protect the downside here and try to build that city on Mars as soon as possible and secure the future of life. And it's going to be an incredibly exciting adventure. Now, the sales pitch for going to Mars is that it's going to be cramped, dangerous, difficult, very hard work. You might die, and that's the sales pitch. I hope you like it. So far from being some sort of escape hatch, it will be extremely difficult and dangerous and tough. Mars is a fixer-upper of a planet, and so it's going to take some work to make it easy to live there. But one day we could make Mars a planet like Earth, and I think we should. So just some facts about Starship, and these numbers will evolve over time. The height of the ship is about 50 meters, 164 feet. The 9 meter or 30 foot diameter, well, you can just see it basically. It's got about 1,200 tons of propellant on the ship, and thrust is about 1,500 tons. Now these numbers we'll probably add more propellant over time, increase thrust. Diameter will stay the same. It's a huge pain to change diameter. So that'll tend to stay the same, but it'll probably get a little bit longer. And we're expecting payload capacity of 100 to 150 tons, depending on which orbit. So to a Starlink orbit, roughly 100 tons. Over time, I think we can probably get the orbit for orbital refilling, the payload to an orbit for orbital refilling to about 200 tons, which is going to be very important for getting to Mars. So for getting to Mars, you also need the orbital refilling. Just like you have aerial refueling, the rockets will need orbital refilling. It's actually mostly oxygen. There's 3.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel. So that's why it's refilling, not refueling. So heat shield. So this is the world's largest heat shield. This is, we actually make this at our little factory in Florida near Cape Canaveral. We call it the bakery. And we're actually using a lot of techniques that are used for roofing tiles. So we need to have a heat shield that is capable of resisting extreme heat, but also is not crazy expensive. And our heat shield team has done amazing work in creating the world's largest heat shield, and one that is reusable, but also robust and low cost. So it's not a crazy money heat shield. And yeah, need good heat shield technology for entering from orbit. Orbital refilling. We were going to do an animation of this, but it looked a bit wrong. It is a fluid transfer. So, yeah. Play a little Barry White, you know. Okay. So that's one of the technologies that is necessary for getting to Mars. So the ship would get to orbit with payload, and then in orbit we'd refill the tanks, so it would have enough propellant to.
Mis amigos, por si están conectando, ahorita estamos escuchando a lo que es Elon Musk hablando sobre su Starship, sobre, podemos decir, su visión en colonizar, pues estamos hablando Marte, ¿verdad? ¿Cómo funcionará? Wow, este nuevo Starship, que en pocas palabras va a poder cargar aproximadamente 200 toneladas de peso. Y ahora lo estamos viendo porque aparte pues estamos hablando de una nueva industria que está surgiendo ahorita en nuestros ojos. Pero no solo esto puede ayudar mucho a Virgin Galactic porque son pocas las compañías que van a ofrecer lo que son estos viajes a órbita y muy posible pues en un futuro los viajes a lo que puede ser Marte o la Luna, porque esto así es como se comienza. Y pues estamos viendo aquí el comienzo y qué mejor pues a estar aquí en vivo viendo lo que dice Elon Musk. Aquí acompáñenme, me parece que era algo muy bonito pasarlo y aquí estamos. Y ahí comenten qué es lo que ustedes piensan.
But then there was an extra half barrel section that the team deleted, and totally accidentally it's 69 meters. It's also booster 4 and ship 20. I mean, this is a pure coincidence. Those numbers won't leave me alone. It's just, I hope it's good luck. So yeah, so propellant capacity is like around 3,400 tons. I think like I said, it'll probably it will increase over time. Probably get to 36, maybe 3,800 tons. Thrust is around 7,600 tons. That'll probably increase too over time. Just to put this into perspective, though, the Saturn V was 7.5 million pounds of thrust, and Starship is 17. So it's more than twice the thrust of a Saturn V, which was that's the largest rocket ever to get to orbit. It's worth noting Super Heavy is the largest flying object of any kind, or will be. It's yeah, very big. You can see it right there. That booster has 29.
El Starship, pues en pocas palabras será, podemos decir, el cohete más grande que ha volado en la historia. Okay, imagínense eso. En la historia va a poder cargar aproximadamente 200 toneladas. Y está hecho para pues cargarse de fuel entre medio del espacio para pues la idea fundamental es llegar a Marte de esta nave. Entonces ese es el plan de Elon Musk, ¿ok? Y pues esto es increíble, ¿ok? Llegar a Marte y pues cargar 200 toneladas es para colonizar, en pocas palabras, Marte, ¿verdad?
Construction was 13 months. So it's quite an epic structure. It's really worth emphasizing that the whole launch system, which is basically stage 0, is I'd say as complex and difficult as either the booster or the ship. So I really want to emphasize that this is and it's a very difficult thing that requires a lot of hardcore engineering, and it's really like I said, the tower and the launch system which I call stage 0, is just as important as stage 1 and stage 2. I mean, this is really some wild stuff here. In fact, I mean, hard to believe it's real, except, you know, it's right there. So, yeah. And then Raptor development, Raptor 1 was 185 tons of thrust. Raptor 2 is 230 tons of thrust, and I think over time we can get that to probably 250 tons. So that's, and it's also significantly simplified. So you can see the difference between V1 and V2. The V2 is, V1 looks like kind of like a Christmas tree spaghetti pile. A lot of fiddly bits. And V2 is greatly simplified while also increasing thrust at the same time. So it actually, Raptor 2 costs about half as much as Raptor 1, despite having much more thrust. And I think just generally being a much easier engine to build and a more robust engine. So very excited about Raptor version 2, and it's only going to get better from here. So yeah, so Raptor 2 is pretty sick, and we've actually the peak thrust that we've operated Raptor 2 at this point is 247 tons, and so I'm confident that with some improvements we can get to a 250 ton operating point, and continue to simplify and sort of robustify the engine. So it's really a spectacular piece of engineering. Extremely difficult to make and succeed. Engine has been mind-bogglingly difficult, but it is one of the essential keys to. I mean, it is essential, obviously, to making Starship work. It'll be the first full flow stage combustion engine to get to orbit. Yeah. Kind of need that ISP and thrust to weight. So why Starbase? A lot of people like say why Starbase? Why here? And we kind of needed a confluence of factors. Getting to orbit, you want to launch eastward so that you have help from Earth's rotation. So the closer you are to the equator, the more of a sort of a boost from Earth rotation that you get. So you want to be as south as possible and launch.
Mis amigos, por si se están conectando y todos dirán, ¿qué es lo que estamos viendo? Bueno, estamos viendo lo que es Elon Musk en este momento. Está en vivo escribiendo las actualizaciones de Starshift, ¿ok? Y esto es muy, pero muy, puedo decir, importante para la industria. Y más si estamos invirtiendo en las acciones de lo que es a empresas que tienen que ver con ya pues la industria de los vuelos turísticos al espacio o las empresas que pues ponen satélites al espacio. Creo que estamos aquí viendo el comienzo de algo que pues pueda venir y ser la nueva industria en cual pues así como dice Elon Musk, en forma de venir y colonizar, pues los planes de Elon Musk es poder colonizar lo que es Marte completamente con este Starship. Yo como lo veo como inversor, veo un gran potencial en ya por sí, pues esto llamar el interés de personas, pues comenzar yendo a órbita, ¿verdad? Y después de ahí, pues ya decir, bueno, ya estas naves, la tecnología va a ir mejorando conforme el tiempo y ya pues si colonizan Marte, pues ya vuelos a Marte. Entonces yo siento que aquí estamos viendo el comienzo de una industria y estamos viendo pues aquí Elon Musk, ¿verdad? Entonces ahorita estamos aquí poniendo atención. Saludos a todos. Después al final vamos a saludar un poquito ahí y vamos a platicarles Pero gracias por acompañarme. Me pareció muy interesante aquí compartirlo.
So I think we've got a video to show what we hope will happen with launch. We'll play it now. Oh wait, sorry. We have some upcoming Starship missions. Orbital flight is really just the beginning. So we're going to have a number of Starlink missions that will launch Starlink satellite version 2. But even more exciting than that is the NASA human spaceflight mission. We're incredibly honored that NASA has selected Starship to take astronauts back to the moon for the first time in half a century, which is kind of mind-blowing. So,
bueno, entonces Starship ahorita esa será la nave que utilizará la NASA para poner astronautas en la luna una vez más. Muy interesante, muy buen contrato.
We'll get it done. And then there's also the Dear Moon mission, which is going to take artists around the moon, and that's Isaku Miyazawa, and he's going to select I think a dozen artists and do a loop around the moon, which will be very exciting. And there's going to be some future announcements that I think people will be pretty fired up about. So anyway, super exciting future ahead with this. There'll probably be a few bumps in the road, but we want to iron those out with satellite missions and test missions and get to a high flight rate and then have something that's extremely reliable for human spaceflight. So, yeah.
Bienvenidos a todos, aquí estamos viendo lo que es el principio, siento yo, de la industria de los vuelos al espacio. Aquí creo que estamos viendo la historia y creo que en un par de años vamos a reflexionar y vamos a ver cómo comenzó todo esto, ¿verdad? Y pues bienvenidos a todos los que estamos aquí viendo. Vamos, seguimos aquí. Wow, increíble cómo regresa la otra parte de regreso. Miren eso. Ya lo había visto, pero al verlo así. Wow. Esta es la nave que van a utilizar para colonizar lo que es Marte. La que va a llevar a los astronautas ahorita de la NASA de regreso a la Luna una vez más. Incluso parece que van a llevar 1000 personas de artistas a través de la Luna. Y muchos puede cargar hasta 200 toneladas. Oh, miren, eso ya sería Marte. Miren, así es como piensan colonizar Marte. Esto ya sería ya colonizando Marte. Miren el plan de Elon Musk. Wow.
All right.
Es todo. Hay que ponerle también. Elon, que suba Virgin Galactic.
Any questions?
Vamos a resetear la cámara y sigamos aquí escuchando las preguntas que le van a hacer. Y después vamos a saludar a todos.
Make this real. Cool. Fire away. Anyone? I can't see you, so you probably just have to yell it out or something.
Hi, Elon.
Yes, there's 6 Raptors on Starship. Currently 3 with the vacuum nozzle, 3 sea level. Sorry?
Check.
And I think if I would say, like, we'll probably end up adding another 3 vacuum engines to kind of, fill in the gaps and stretch the ship. I think is going to make a lot of sense. You'll have to yell, unfortunately. So we are building a launch site, a Starship launch tower at 39A at Cape Kennedy, and we are also building a Starship production facility at the Cape. So we'll have production facility and launch site here, and a production facility and launch site at the Cape as well. It's important to have redundancy.
Hi,
Sorry.
Elon. It's Irene Klotz with Aviation Week over here.
I've got lights in my eyes, so unfortunately I can't see.
Okay, well-
I'm blinded. So I can hear where
We're
the
all
speaker is
here.
coming from.
Okay.
But,
You should. I believe you're expecting to hear in a couple weeks about the possible finding of no significant impact from the FAA. Have you gotten any indications if that's going to come through, and what is your time frame for the orbital flight test? Thanks.
well, we don't have a ton of insight into where things stand with the FAA. We have gotten sort of a rough indication that there may be an approval in March, but that's all we know.
So, hi, Elon. Marcus Hervey. Can you talk about the point-to-point capability? Is there a possibility between here and Cape Canaveral?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess technically yes. So, I mean, depending on how good things get with Starship, there are some scenarios where it might actually be the lowest cost means of transporting cargo long distances. So the interesting thing is that the capital efficiency of a rocket is much better than the capital efficiency of a plane for long distance flights. So now this would really be more for, if you're going like, I don't know, a quarter or a third or halfway around the world, where you know, if you went from, I don't know, say here to Singapore or something, like that's a long flight. So, I mean, I don't know how long that is. I'm not sure you can even go there nonstop, but it's probably like 20 hours plus. And, but in a rocket, it would be less than an hour. So like 45 minutes or thereabouts. So that means you'd be able to use the rocket 20 times more often than an aircraft. So it's 20 times the capital efficiency. So provided the propellant cost is, competitive with aircraft, and bear in mind, like I was saying, like there's 3.5 tons of liquid oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel. And liquid oxygen is basically just the cost of electricity, because it's in the air, basically. There is a scenario where it's economically compelling to do long-distance cargo and people transport with Starship. That'd be very cool, and I think that'd be great for getting a high flight rate and a business case for supporting a lot of Starships operating.
Que muy bien esto realmente.
Basically, nothing's faster than.
Lo que está diciendo que en pocas palabras que en un futuro puede ser adecuado este Starship para volar de un punto a otro punto, digamos de aquí a Estados Unidos a Singapur. Estamos hablando de aproximadamente 20 horas, ¿ok? En cual este Starship lo pudiera hacer en 45 minutos. Y pues hablando de un costo eficiente similar al avión, incluso puede ser hasta más económico. Imagínense recortarse un vuelo de 20 horas a 45 minutos. Increíble.
Maybe in terms of SpaceX itself, how you and private investment on a dollar value compares to the taxpayer-funded projects or contracts that SpaceX has won over the years.
Well, I think objectively, the cost efficiency of SpaceX is the best in history, I think, for any rocket development, and we are talking about a rocket that's more than twice the mass and thrust of a Saturn V, and also designed to be fully reusable, which is obviously also much better from an environmental standpoint to have a fully reusable rocket, for a development cost that is, between 5 and 10% of Saturn V. So that's pretty good. Because we need to make it work, so it's not worked yet, but it will work. Might be a few bumps along the road, but it'll work. I feel at this point highly confident that we'll get to orbit this year. We're making a lot of rockets, making a lot of engines. We're close to achieving a Raptor 2 every day production rate. So 7 a week, which is tough for a complex engine. I think by the end of this year we'll be able to produce a ship and a booster per month. So this is I don't know, at least an order of magnitude, maybe 2 orders of magnitude more efficient than anything in the past. Yeah. So.
Hey, Elon, this is Joey Roulette for Supercluster. Just wondering, what does SpaceX's plan and timeline look like if the FAA ultimately decides to do a deeper environmental review of Starbase? And then one other thing, you might be able to give us an updated figure on what it costs to Starship and what it would cost a customer to buy a flight on one. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I am optimistic that we will get approval. I think objectively, I think this is not something that will be harmful to the environment. We've obviously flown the ship several times and done multiple landings and takeoffs and landings, and we've fired the engines a lot. So I think the reality is that it would not have a significant impact. Now, of course, that doesn't mean things don't get delayed from a regulatory standpoint. And we are in a litigious society, and so there's always sort of lawsuits from someone, lawsuit city. Now we do have the alternative of the Cape, and we actually applied for environmental approval for launch from the Cape a few years ago and received it. So we actually are approved from an environmental standpoint to launch from 39A. So I guess our worst case scenario is that we would, I don't know, be delayed for 6 to 8 months to build up the Cape launch tower and launch from there. From a cost standpoint, the costs will improve significantly over time. So, because it'll take us a moment to achieve full reusability and full and rapid reusability, we'll probably lose a few vehicles along the way. With Falcon 9, I think it took us 14 or 15 attempts to successfully land the first booster. I don't think it'll take us that many with Starship because we have that experience. But it's certainly not a sure thing that it'll work the first time. From a cost standpoint, it's a 100-ton capability to orbit. On a marginal cost to launch basis, that doesn't count fixed costs, which obviously have to be covered. It may be as little as a few $1 million per flight. Maybe even as low as $1 million per flight. So this is crazy. These are crazy low numbers by space standards. Crazy low.
Si digamos está indicando que es posiblemente que el costo de esta nave, digamos, en llevarla al espacio, en órbita, digamos, puede ser entre $1 millón, pero puede cargar lo que es aproximadamente 100 toneladas, ¿ok? Entonces, si nos ponemos a pensar, sería de ver, pues que sí, y puede llegar, digamos, a Singapur en 45 minutos. Imagínense eso, $1 millón, 100 toneladas de productos, equipo, personas. Increíble.
For a 100-ton to orbit capability. And 100 tons to a useful orbit, not to a low orbit. To a low orbit, it would be 150 tons. So this is ridiculously good compared to everything else. And it should be, because if you think of if this was if aircraft were not reusable, how much would an air ticket cost? It's like, for, I don't know what, a 787 or 777 goes for these days. I don't know, a few $100 million. If you had to spend, $200 million every flight, it would be very expensive to fly somewhere, and you'd need 2 of them for, another one for the return trip. So, it would obviously be absurd. So if you can imagine if we were in a world where aircraft were expendable, and then someone came along with a reusable aircraft, it would be an absolutely profound game changer. That's what needs to happen for life to become multiplanetary, and that's what this design, I'm confident, is capable of that. It's just a question of how long it will take to refine that and have it really dialed.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, this is Andrea Leinfelder of the Houston Chronicle. I wanted to know, when and how do you plan to test Starship refueling in space? And also, aside from NASA, Dear Moon, and Starlink, can you elaborate on the potential customer base for Starship? Thank you.
I apologize. I zoned out for a second. I was just thinking about something. Could you say that question again?
Sorry. When and
We have some mic issues.
okay, when and how do you plan to test Starship refueling in space?
Yeah.
And aside from NASA, Dear Moon, and Starlink, can you elaborate on potential customers for Starship? Thank you.
I think orbital refilling, and I want to emphasize it is refilling, not refueling, because it's 3.5 times as much oxygen than fuel. So we mostly are carrying oxygen up there. I optimistically, towards the end of next year, I think I'd be surprised if it's longer than 2 years for doing the refilling. And there are a lot of additional customers that will want to use Starship. I don't want to steal their thunder. They're going to make their announcements, and but I think this will get a lot of use, a lot of attention. It's like I said, once we make this work, it's an utterly profound breakthrough in access to orbit. And when you have an utterly profound breakthrough, the use cases will be hard to imagine. I mean, when aircraft first came along, aircraft were viewed as toys, like they were like a novelty, not a means of transport. They were like, oh look, we can fly like a bird briefly and dangerously for a few minutes. Nobody at the time, or at least I think very few people at the time, thought that there would be a global aircraft industry with airports throughout the world carrying people.
Ahí estamos. Me gusta lo que dice, miren, y esto es increíble y es muy cierto. Cuando comenzaron los aviones, pues personas no creían de lo que podía hacer, ¿verdad? Es una gran industria ahora. Los aviones, imagínense que no existieran los aviones, ¿cómo viajaríamos? Y cuando recién salían, pues sí, eran súper caro viajar, era exclusivo. Nadie se hubiera imaginado la gran industria que es, pues ahora en estos momentos. Y esto es lo que él ve, pues eso mismo. Ya ve a veces venir y podemos asegurar y estos viajes a órbita, pues puede hacer otra la nueva industria y por eso aquí estamos. Todos los que están aquí escuchando, es por eso estamos aquí.
And we really can't even imagine all the use cases at this point.
Hi, Elon. This is Steve Clark with the Brownsville Herald. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
So if the FAA does come back and say we need an EIS, does Starbase bounce back from that at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it would obviously set us back for quite some time because an EIS takes a lot longer than an EA. So we would have to shift our priorities to Cape Kennedy.
Okay, and long term, what do you envision for Starbase? Like a spaceport with flights coming and going and Starship manufacturing, or what is the future role of Starbase?
The future role of Starbase, I think, it's well suited to be kind of like our advanced R&D location. So it's like where we would try out new designs and new versions of the rocket, and then I think probably Cape Kennedy would be our sort of main operational launch site, and then I don't know, over time I think we'll have floating spaceports like ocean spaceports. We got these 2 converted oil rigs that are going to be turned into orbital launch sites, and they can be moved around the world. So, that I think there could be quite a few of those. I think about if I think about what would really work for long distance travel, because the rocket is quite loud. You want to be, I don't know, 20 miles away from a major city or 30 miles away from a major city, just so you don't, you're not disturbing people too much. So I think probably most of the launch sites long term will be kind of ocean or sea spaceports. So like maybe located like 20 miles, 30 miles offshore.
Incluso está agarrando barcos petroleros, ¿ok? Que los convertirá como ya donde pues para venir y poder lanzar estos cohetes en el océano. Está fuerte, está bastante fuerte.
Have a high flight rate, but without disturbing people too much. You know, I think people are willing to, you know, have something that's loud occasionally, but if you want to have it frequently, then it probably needs to be offshore.
Hello, Elon. I'm Cam Gerlach with the SpaceX Reddit community. So you've talked a lot about how Raptor 2 is crucially important for Starship development and for the future of Starship. So I'm curious, what general improvements have you made with Raptor 2 to ensure it's not only more efficient and more powerful, but also much easier to produce and less expensive as well and faster? And how do you plan to continue to iterate further on the design in the future?
So, Raptor 2 is an almost complete redesign relative to Raptor 1. So basically,
Mis amigos, para los que se están conectando dirán, ¿qué es? ¿Qué está pasando? What's happening here? Ya cerró la bolsa de valores y aquí sigue a Marrin pasando sus en vivos. ¿Será que cometió un error como siempre? Pero no, mis amigos, aquí estamos viendo realmente lo que es el en vivo de Elon Musk. Está haciendo la presentación y actualizaciones de lo que es su Starship. Yo creo que esto es muy bueno para la industria en lo que son, pues podemos decir ya los viajes al espacio, a órbita, los turísticos, todo esto, los planes que tienen. Y yo creo que esto es ya, podemos decir, los primeros pasos que nos abre esta industria. Ahora, yo como inversor me gusta, pues a mí siempre estar actualizado de todo, porque esto es necesario como inversor y por eso estamos viendo, bueno, lo que está sucediendo en esta nueva industria, porque aquí yo siento que estamos viendo ya lo nuevo que viene. Y yo creo que como inversores tenemos que estar informados, ¿ok? Porque quiera o no, es una empresa a la par de Blue Origin y Virgin Galactic que quieren hacer esto. Y en la forma que van y el proceso que van y la velocidad que van, no me sorprendería que pues un par de años estas industrias sean completamente pues un valor increíble, ¿verdad? Y pues aquí estamos viendo ya los principios de esto. Y Elon Musk lo que quiere es colonizar Marte, ¿ok? Y con este Starship pues sí lo va a poder hacer. Y no solo eso, esto también le abre mucho negocio a pues también empresas como Virgin Galactic y Blue Origin. Si quieren colonizar Marte, pues muchos van a querer volar ahí. Pues esto es donde tenemos que ver todo esto que viene en un futuro.
With a bit more deletion and integration, I think the engine will be sort of flame proof, more or less, and then we can get rid of the shrouds, which would be a big mass savings. Yeah. So a lot more could go on. We're also operating at a higher chamber pressure. I think we can probably operate. I think over time we can operate it at 330 bar sustained in the main chamber, without having the pre-burner pressures be too high, by essentially not by losing less pressure. There's like a whole pressure ladder going from the
Mientras tanto, mis amigos, al final de todo les voy a dar un resumen de lo que dijo Elon Musk para que aquí podamos platicarlo. Okay, no se olviden darle me gusta al video, ayudan increíblemente, compártanlo, denle me gusta. Aquí al final vamos a dar podemos decir, resumirlo, ¿verdad? Esto puede ser también muy bueno para Tesla, ¿ok? Recordemos Tesla, el dueño Elon, bueno, para muchos inversores, pues no sé, puede ser bueno para Tesla también.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight. Can you talk a little bit about the abort modes that are available for ship if there were ever to be a problem during the climb to orbit? What would be available to the crew in that regard? And also on that same level, the life support systems for ship. Where do those stand, and what are the challenges that you're finding with just the sheer volume in Starship for that? Thank you.
So Starship will not have an independent abort system, but I think something that would make sense is to have the thruster weight of the ship be enough that it could do it could take off from the booster, even if the booster has a failure at the pad level. So if you can get the thruster weight of the ship at sea level above 1, then even if there is something goes wrong with the booster, the ship can essentially fly away from the booster. And so that's something that I think would be important for carrying people and also for high-value cargo, to have the ship have a thruster weight greater than 1 even at sea level. And then there's like I said, that would be like the 9-engine version. And then even if you lost 1 engine, I think you should still be able to do an abort. So I think for crewed missions, we would essentially maybe detank the ship to some degree so that you'd have kind of a launch abort capability with the ship, even if you lost an engine. That'd be my recommendation. From a life support standpoint, we would have a sort of a renewable, like for long, we could scale up the life support system in Dragon. That would certainly be an option, and that would work for missions that are, say, a week or 2 weeks. That would be fine. For missions to Mars, you'd want a life support system that is renewable. So it's essentially recycling everything in a closed loop system with close to zero lost mass. So that would be a more advanced system, because you'd have to convert the CO2 back into O2 and kind of recycle, poop and urine and stuff. So that's a harder problem, but it's not an immediate problem. We can certainly scale up Dragon for any kind of missions that are, a few weeks long.
Hi, Elon. Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Thanks for taking some questions. I'm wondering if you do get that approval from the FAA in March. I know that there's really no way of knowing, but could you talk a little bit about the hardware readiness, sort of where you are technically? The launch tower is pretty incredible, but sort of the rocket, the ground systems, software. Like if you were to get some kind of approval from the FAA in March, would you be looking at, how quickly could the hardware be ready to go?
Yeah, I think we're close to having the hardware ready to go. So right now, I think we're tracking to have the regulatory approval and hardware readiness around the same time. Around the same. Hopefully, basically a couple months for both.
Hi, Seth Krakowski with SpaceExport.com. You mentioned launching from the sea. Could you give us an update on the current status of using Phobos and Deimos for Starship operations?
Bueno, amigos, aquí seguimos viendo, pues para mí esto es el primer paso grande a esta industria que pues ya la estamos viendo. Creo que esto es, aquí podemos ver a Elon Musk ya hablar sobre ya los nuevos pasos que están dando, ¿ok? El Starship podemos decir que será la nave más grande, ¿ok? Que pues vuele, ¿verdad? Estamos hablando de una nave que puede potencialmente cargar aproximadamente 200 toneladas, 150 toneladas de peso, ¿ok? Y esta pues puede llegar, pues sí, en pocas palabras, hasta Marte, ¿verdad? Yo creo que estos son los planes de Elon Musk, colonizar Marte. Otra, pues NASA ya se sabe que pues ya está en los planes de llevar astronautas una vez más a la Luna, y lo van a hacer con Starship. Y también hay posibilidades que esta nave se utilice para llevar cargo de un punto a otro punto, porque por lo que estamos viendo el tamaño puede cargar mucho y pues puede llegar a volar desde, digamos, a Singapur a los Estados Unidos. Es un vuelo de aproximadamente 20 horas, lo puede hacer en 45 minutos, ¿ok? Y podemos decir un costo muy eficiente. Ahora, ¿por qué estamos viendo esto? Yo creo que lo estamos viendo porque de una u otra manera estamos viendo el comienzo de esta industria, ¿ok? Y no muchas empresas van a estar en esta industria. Una, porque quiera o no, no es fácil, ¿ok? Ahorita Elon Musk está pasando los permisos para que lo puedan ellos a volar. Yo creo que en un cierto punto donde él quiere volar. Entonces, en marzo se mira esto para comenzar ya a probar mejor lo que es la nave. Y quiera o no, no es fácil, ¿ok? Y dos, esto pues nos muestra que podamos vivir un tiempo donde si estas naves comienzan a volar, que es este año, por lo que se ve, Starship comenzará ya a hacer ya sus vuelos este año, y esto se le junta a lo que es Virgin Galactic, y yo creo que pueda ser ya muy pronto lo que le hablamos, la temporada de la fiebre de los vuelos al espacio. Y quiera o no, yo esto lo veo como negocio, pues estamos aquí viendo, escuchando lo que está pasando, pero así lo tenemos que ver. En realidad que esto es el comienzo y aquí estamos escuchando, aquí pasándola bien. Les mando un fuerte abrazo a todos los que se conectaron. Okay, aquí seguimos. Nosotros trabajamos 24/7. Aquí se debería de poner un búho. Yo creo que eso voy a hacer. Voy a poner un búho cuando me conecto a estas horas. Pero aquí no paramos. Aquí le damos y le damos y le damos. Y así tenemos que ver, tenemos que saber de todo lo que está sucediendo. Quiera o no, esto ayuda increíblemente. Sigamos aquí viendo.
That thing really wants to melt, you know. It's got like on the order of a gigawatt of heat, so it's pretty hot. Like a gigawatt's like what a nuclear power plant produces, so it really is desperately trying to melt at any point in time. We've got, we're flowing an immense amount of cryogenic fuel to cool the chamber in the channels. We have head-end film cooling. We've got throat film cooling, and we're just trying to get the exact sort of balance between head-end film cooling and throat film cooling to not melt the chamber. I think we're pretty close. Like we have a couple engines in the stand that have I think 700 or 800 seconds of operation and several start cycles. So it's looking positive, but that's the remaining issue is melting the chamber. But in the meantime, we're scaling up old production to get to 1 a day or better. So apart from melted chambers, we're doing well. We've got a lot of pumps, a lot of electronics, a lot of pre-burner controllers. Just not melting the chamber, which is very difficult, is the last remaining challenge. But I think we're very close to solving that. And then the production system has a lot of momentum. Like I said, we're really, like next week we'll probably make at least 5 or 6 Raptor 2s, for example. And I think we'll be at a 7 a week or better by next month. But those are crazy. These are crazy numbers for rocket engines, by the way. Yeah.
Hi, Elon. Robert Perlman with Space.com and
Y es increíble porque están produciendo aproximadamente lo que es un motor, ¿ok? Al día. Es increíble. Un Raptor 7, el motor al día. Ese es el nivel de lo que están produciendo. En pocas palabras, pues sí quieren entrar fuerte al espacio.
We're going to be making a lot of ships, a lot of boosters, obviously a lot of engines. It's kind of interesting, like with the booster with 33 engines and the ship with 9 engines is 42. There we go again. And that also total coincidence. adding legs to land on the moon, we do not think is like that can be done pretty quickly. So I don't really see any conflict between achieving rapid reusability and getting to the moon. A high production rate solves many ills. So we're aiming for a high production rate.
Hi, Lauren Grush with The Verge. I'm wondering if you can clarify the number of launches that you plan to conduct in order to do these refillings. I know a lot of numbers have been thrown around, so I'm wondering if you have landed on a final number. And how quickly do you plan to launch those missions back to refuel the vehicle to get to the moon? Thanks.
Yeah, so the missions would happen pretty fast for refilling the vehicles to minimize boil off of the cryogenic propellants. Now for the vehicle going to the moon, we have some installation to minimize boil off. But we'd probably be launching, I don't know, probably every few hours, aspirationally. So, yeah.
Hi, Elon. Kevin Haymeyer from Space Eccentric on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you. My viewers are really hungry to know anything about the interior design for crewed Starship. You have HLS, you have Dear Moon, and last we heard, maybe a year or two ago, you were looking to hire Tesla employees to design the interior for Starship. How's that going?
Well, we aren't focusing a lot on the interior quite yet. I mean, that will be important down the road, but our focus right now is just getting to orbit and proving out return of the booster and return of the ship. Yeah, it's fundamentally very difficult to build a fully reusable rocket given the strength of Earth's gravity and the density of our atmosphere. Like there's no, you can't have a lot of mass margin. So our focus is solving that rapid reusability. Like I said, we'll have a high production rate, so we're not dependent on we're not dependent on full reusability, but really that's the breakthrough that's fundamentally important to change the course of human civilization to become a multi-planet species.
Elon, this will be the last question for you.
Evening, Elon. Bob Duncan. I'm a local resident. Are we cutting out? Is that better? Hi, evening. My name is Bob Duncan. I'm a local resident here in the area. And first off, thank you for a very cool evening. So this has been a lot of fun for us. As a local resident, it's been exciting to watch the amazing progress that SpaceX has made here in Boca Chica. And I was just curious, we're standing on the southern tip of the state of Texas. We're a few hundred yards from your residence. Could you just speak to what, if anything, has been appealing or advantageous about operating in the state of Texas versus other parts of the country? Thank you.
Well, I think we've, well, I mean, we've had a lot of support from the community, and something that just happens over time with societies is that kind of rules and regulations build up, and they build up, more in some places than others, and they didn't, I think Texas has the right amount of rules and regulations. Yeah. So, thank you all for coming. I hope you've enjoyed the evening, and I think we might be able to get you closer to the rocket if you'd like. So we'll get you as close as possible while still being safe. And yeah, feel free to take pictures, have a good time, and let's go like hell to have an exciting future. Thank you.
Hey, look. Mis amigos y amigas, aquí estamos, el Starshift. Podemos decir que será la nave más grande que vuele, ¿ok? Puede aproximadamente cargar 150, 200, 100 toneladas, ¿ok? De equipo. Y esta es la que piensa colonizar ya Marte. Esta será la nave que la estarán llevando también a la Luna. NASA, después de muchos años, regresará a la Luna y regresará vía usando lo que es Starship. Ahora, ¿por qué vine y transmití este en vivo? Yo creo que esto es muy importante para la industria, ¿ok? Para la industria, lo nuevo que viene, lo podemos decir, este es el primer paso, ¿verdad? Yo siento que este año va a ser muy importante para todas las empresas que están en lo que son estos vuelos a la órbita, a todo esto, todo lo que despierte, podemos decir, esta idea de poder ir ya a otro lugar más que la Tierra. Creo que este será el año, ¿ok? Y pues ustedes saben, yo tengo una inversión de 26,000 acciones de Virgin Galactic, ¿ok? Y aparte que ustedes saben, también tengo 1 billón de Shivas. Y yo creo que las criptomonedas van a venir y tomar pues de una u otra parte fundamental en lo que es esto en el espacio, ¿verdad? Yo siento que de una u otra manera pues no va a existir ya lo que es las monedas y nada de eso, ni los dólares. Digamos, yo siento que va a ser las criptomonedas si esto llega a suceder, ¿verdad? Y quién quita, ustedes saben que Elon Musk, pues quiera o no, pues está en el mundo de Dogecoin. Ya ven cómo lo están pues promocionando. Ahora les recuerdo, mis amigos y amigas, únanse a nuestro club VIP. Estoy aquí comenzando nuestro portfolio de acciones y criptomonedas. Y aquí muestro las posiciones que estoy haciendo. Lo estoy creando de cero. También lo que son noticias en nuestro club VIP. Entonces únanse. Aquí el link lo van a encontrar en lo que es en los videos. Ok, en la parte de abajo van a encontrar el video. O si no, se pueden meter a nuestra página oficial marvinmartinez.com. Y en la parte de ahí pueden ser únete a nuestro club VIP. Entonces tienen varias formas, pero ahí yo pongo alertas, pongo noticias, todo esto, porque yo creo que como inversionista tiene que estar pues bien informado de todo lo que está sucediendo. Creo que es clave de uno pues venir y tomar movimientos buenos, ¿verdad? Para ver lo que pueda suceder, ver estas nuevas industrias. Yo creo que esto es muy importante. Yo creo que esto puede cambiar. Y cada vez estamos viendo más. Y yo creo que puede haber una fiebre de ir al espacio o a la órbita, pues en este año, ¿verdad? Y pues uno no sabe. Como siempre antes de comprar o vender una acción, siempre analicen y estudien. Recuérdense que el dinero se cuida como un bebé. Aquí solamente es entretenimiento. Espero que la hayan pasado increíblemente. Destruyan ese botón que les gusta. Y como siempre les digo, recuérdense que no hay nada imposible, que todo lo pueden hacer si ustedes quieren. Y nos vemos. Vamos a saludar. Yo siempre les saludo, ¿verdad? Hoy sí no es saludar. Vamos a saludar rapidito. Enrique Ortiz dice, hola, saludos desde Canadá. Jesús Santiago, un fuerte abrazo, Marvin. Vamos con todo desde Virgin. Esto es todo. Saúl López, saludos, Marvin. Aquí estoy listo para la info. Un fuerte abrazo. Escobar, que me perdí. Aquí estamos viendo sobre lo que es Starship, de lo que es SpaceX. Acosta, saludos, Marvin. Aquí siempre apoyándote. Muchas gracias a todos los que me apoyan día tras día. Yo sé, ya no es horas, pero aquí no dormimos. Dice, el dinero no duerme, pues tampoco nosotros, ¿verdad? A Tomás y Belén, Elon es un marciano que quiere regresar a casa. Bueno, en realidad que es sorprendente. Alejandro Lozano, saludos, Marvin, con todo, con Virgin, eso es todo. Uber experiencias, pero con estos lugares para vivir en la Tierra, que voy a buscar personas en Marte. Anuel García, mañana compro unas 100 acciones de Virgin. Y Leonel Méndez, Marvin, te voy a enviar lo chavo y me compras el ticket de NFT, me lo envías. Diego, hay que ir. Para el NFT hice un video, si no lo han visto, de AMC, de lo que es agarrar el NFT de Batman, que yo ya pues agarré el ticket, ¿verdad? Entonces voy a estar ahí presente. Pero hay que ir, hay que presentarse y ese es el catch. Por eso que AMC va a producir mucho dinero porque uno tiene que ir al cine y eso es lo más importante. Saúl López, con esa velocidad me desmayo. Es increíble, imagínense, de Singapur hasta pues Estados Unidos, 45 minutos, un vuelo que se tarda aproximadamente 20 horas. Wow, increíble. Alejandro Hernández, saludos amigo, estamos en el camino correcto, SPCE. Roberto Carlos, buenas noches Marvin, wow, let's go. Floriberto Barroso, Virgin, que mucho más barato. Víctor Tolentino, hey, a todos los que estuvieron en la mañana, estuvieron en la tarde y están ahorita, gracias por el apoyo, les mando un fuerte abrazo. Ángel Cabrera, ¿de qué se trató? Es de Space Shift. Elias García, saludos Marvin, excelente. Jesús Tolamento, Marvin, puedes estar diciéndonos qué es lo que está pasando. Sí, ahorita ya al final ya les expliqué. Luis Pablo, Tomás Belén, todos aquí están. Finanzas Positivas, Saúl López, Beto Silva, todos los que están aquí, Raúl Jiménez, Ingrimar, saludos, ¿cómo estamos? Saber, Beto, Cisco dice, Cisco Music, ¿crees que ayude a Virgin Galactic que suban? Yo creo que ayuda a la industria, ¿verdad? Yo creo que tal vez no ayuda a la acción, tal vez si va a ayudar a una acción, ayudaría a Tesla, pero lo que yo sí pienso que es como que, ustedes saben que cuando comienza a entrar esta fiebre, ¿ok? De que pues sí pueda hacer lo nuevo el espacio, ¿qué es lo que van a hacer muchas personas? Van a comenzar a buscar, bueno, ¿qué empresa está pública? ¿Dónde vamos a invertir? Yo no sé, ¿verdad? Como siempre, analicen y estudien, ¿verdad? Mucho de esto lo comparten en nuestro club VIP, únanse. Pero en realidad que sí, van a decir, ¿qué empresa, verdad? Y pues lógicamente SpaceX no es pública, ¿ok? Entonces sí, le van a invertir a Tesla, pero está bien, pero Tesla, quiera o no, pero no está tan barata. Entonces van a decir, bueno, ¿qué otra empresa? Y puede hacer Virgin Galactic. Uno no sabe, por eso es que hay que hacer sus investigaciones y sus tareas. Y si no, pues únanse a nuestro club VIP porque ahí voy a estar compartiendo. Yo esto me mantengo yo haciendo día y noche. ¿Okay? Es la diferencia. Aquí somos inversores. Eso es lo que hacemos. ¿Okay? Entonces únanse a nuestro club VIP. Ahí voy a estar compartiendo movimientos, lo que estoy haciendo, portfolios, todo. Entonces únanse, mis amigos y amigas. ¿Okay? El link lo van a encontrar en la parte de los comentarios o en nuestra página oficial marvinmartinez.com. Dice aquí Eli Cardano, esperemos que SPC al 100. Y Ingrid Virgin y Ingrid Tesla vuela mañana también. Bueno, mis amigos, con esta me despido. Espero que pasen una feliz noche. Okay, les mando un fuerte abrazo de donde estén. Nos vemos mañana temprano en el en vivo. Si es que pues puedo abrir mis ojitos. Hoy estamos levantados desde las 4 de la mañana aproximadamente, porque aquí comenzamos a analizar información, después el CPI. Hoy fue un día largo, pero aquí lo estamos terminando bien con el pie derecho. Espero que la pasen increíble, les mando un fuerte abrazo. No se olviden de darle me gusta al video, por favor, ayúdenme ahí. Denle me gusta al video, destruyanlo. Y si les gusta mucho, compártanlo. Bueno, me despido y nos vemos en la próxima. Se me cuidan. Nos vemos.